There is one quiet truth almost nobody tells you about people like this. The moment you really hear it, you will never look at your ex, your parent, or that former friend in quite the same way again. Silence is the one language they cannot survive. You can shout at them. You can break down crying right in front of them. You can beg them to change. Nothing reaches them the way half a year of total dead air will. If you have ever cut them off fully and found yourself wondering why they have not reached out, or quietly asking yourself whether they even care anymore, you need to sit with something important. The fact that they are not reaching out is not proof they moved on. It is very often proof of the exact opposite. Their entire psychological structure rests on one shaky pillar. That pillar is supply. It is attention, admiration, reaction, even a negative one. It is anything that confirms they still exist inside your head. When you go quiet, you do more than end a relationship. You tear the single load-bearing wall out from under someone whose sense of self was never solid to begin with. That is exactly why the opening weeks of silence feel strangely easy for them. They will act completely unbothered. They might even tell mutual friends they feel relieved, finally free. You will hear it secondhand and your stomach will drop. You will wonder if perhaps you were the only one who was truly shattered by what happened. Stay with me, because that performance of indifference is exactly that. It is a performance. It is the opening move of a far longer game that most survivors never get to see the end of. Most people never reach the end because they fold and break silence themselves, or the other person eventually shows their hand months later in a way that snaps every piece into place. What I am about to walk you through is the actual psychological timeline. It is what unfolds in their mind week by week, month by month, when the fuel supply does not just pause, but completely disappears and refuses to come back. Some of what happens will feel almost too small to be true. Some of it will genuinely unsettle you because you will recognize it from something they already pulled on you once before. This is not about handing you closure through pity for them. This is about giving you the pattern awareness that keeps you from being dragged back in when, not if, they eventually come searching again. And they almost always eventually come searching. The real danger, the part almost no one warns you about, is not the loud rage phase everyone expects. It is a much quieter, much more calculated chapter that arrives later. It shows up dressed as something that looks nothing like the person you walked away from. That is the part we are moving toward. Do not skip ahead. If you jump forward, you will miss the exact warning signs that let you see it coming the next time instead of getting blindsided the way so many survivors are the first time around. Those warning signs are far more specific and recognizable than you imagine. The very first thing that happens almost universally is what I call the testing phase. It usually starts much sooner than you would expect. Sometimes it begins within days. Other times, it occurs within the first 2 or 3 weeks. This is not the other person missing you as a person. This is a psychological system running a diagnostic check to see if the supply line is truly cut or just temporarily interrupted. You will get the small, low-risk probes first. It might be a like on an old photo. It might be a view on your story that you know they were not supposed to see. Or perhaps a mutual friend suddenly asks if you have talked to them lately in a way that feels a little too coincidental. These are not accidents. People like this are exceptionally skilled at plausible deniability. A low-stakes probe lets them test the water without ever having to admit they are testing anything at all. If you respond even a little bit, even if it is just a view that they somehow sense through a mutual connection, the diagnostic comes back positive. You will notice the probes ramp up fast. You will receive a text that looks completely neutral on the surface. It might say they found your umbrella, or that they just saw something that reminded them of you. Messages like these are designed specifically so that if you do not respond, they can tell themselves and everyone else that they were simply being kind and you were the one being cold. This is the hoovering stage. It is named after the vacuum cleaner because that is exactly what it is doing. It is trying to suck you back into their orbit. Stay with me because here is what almost nobody explains. It is the part that will genuinely rewire how you read this entire situation. The content of that message rarely matters to them. What matters entirely and only is whether you respond. Someone like this can send a message hoping you are doing well and mean absolutely nothing by the words themselves. The words were never the point. Your reaction is the point. This is why survivors get so confused when they reply politely, only to watch the other person suddenly disappear again for another 2 months. It feels completely illogical if you believe they truly wanted a relationship with you, but it makes perfect sense once you understand they only wanted a data point. They got their answer. The supply was topped off, and the entire system went dormant again until the next depletion cycle arrives. And depletion always comes. No other source of attention, whether it is a new partner, a new friend group, or new admirers online, can truly replace the very specific, intoxicating power of controlling someone who used to belong to them. This is where things get much darker. What happens when you do not respond to the hoovering at all? What happens when probe after probe goes out and hits nothing but complete silence week after week with no exceptions, no slips, and no accidental activity anywhere? This is where the mask really starts to slip in ways you were never allowed to see while you were still inside the relationship. It is the phase that most people never survive long enough in silence to actually witness for themselves. When the hoovering fails completely, when weeks of probes get absolutely zero response, something shifts inside them. This is the part that catches so many survivors off guard, because it no longer looks like longing, it looks like war. This is what is clinically referred to as narcissistic injury. I want you to really sit with that phrase, because it is far more literal than people realize. To someone like this, being ignored is not just a small inconvenience. It is a profound injury. It is a direct wound to the false self they have spent their entire life constructing and defending. Wounded individuals with this kind of psychological structure do not respond with quiet acceptance. They respond with intense aggression. Rage is far more tolerable to a fragile ego than the alternative, which is sitting with the unbearable reality that they are in fact completely replaceable. This is when you start hearing things through the grapevine that do not match the narrative from a few months earlier, back when they told everyone they were absolutely fine and had moved on. Suddenly, there is a whole story circulating about how you were unstable, how you were the difficult one, and how they tried so hard while you just gave up on them. This is the smear campaign. I want to be very clear about something. This is not random gossip. This is a deliberate, strategic operation to rebuild the supply they lost from you by recruiting fresh sources from the people already in your orbit. Every person who hears the smear campaign and offers them sympathy becomes a brand new supply line. Every friend who listens to them and expresses shock, asking if they are okay, and saying they had no idea things were that bad, is feeding the exact system that your silence is starving. This is also when flying monkeys start appearing at your door. Sometimes it is literally a mutual friend reaching out. Sometimes it is a family member. And occasionally it is someone from the other person's new relationship getting in touch with you. They send messages that sound genuinely concerned on the surface, but are actually reconnaissance missions. They tell you the narcissist is really struggling and that you should at least talk to them. They acknowledge that things ended badly, but ask if you think you might be being a little too harsh. These people are almost never acting maliciously on their own. Most of them have absolutely no idea they are being used as a delivery mechanism. However, the effect remains exactly the same. It creates heavy pressure on you to break the very silence that is causing the narcissistic injury in the first place. Here is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. The intensity of the smear campaign is not proportional to how badly you treated them. It is directly proportional to how successfully you have maintained silence. The better you are at staying completely quiet, the worse the story about you tends to get. The other person needs a narrative severe enough to justify to themselves and to everyone else why someone they claim not to care about is somehow still occupying that much of their energy months later. That massive contradiction is the major crack in the whole performance. It only becomes more visible the longer you hold your ground. And this brings us to the part that almost nobody talks about. It is the phase that occurs after the rage burns out, when the other person goes eerily quiet once again. After the injury phase peaks and the smear campaign runs its course, there is usually a long stretch of apparent silence. It can last for months. Sometimes it lasts for a year or more. This is precisely where survivors make their most dangerous miscalculation. They mistake the lull for victory. They think they have finally been left alone. They start to feel safe again. And that is exactly when the most dangerous phase of all begins to quietly take shape. During this eerie lull, the other person is not healing. They are not sitting quietly with what happened. They are rebuilding. They are reassembling the version of themselves that they hand out to the world. They are polishing the public image that took so much damage during the injury phase and the smear campaign. They are softening their tone in casual conversation. They are being almost embarrassingly generous with their new partner. They are quick to tell people they have grown. They are quick to add that the past was not really who they were. And they are exceedingly careful never to mention your name unless someone else brings it up first. Stay with me, because what happens next is what catches most survivors completely off guard. When they eventually resurface, they almost never look anything like the angry, vindictive version they portrayed themselves as during the smear phase. Instead, they come back gentler, softer, almost humble. They might post casually about therapy. They might claim they are working on themselves. They might even reach out through a third party with something close to an apology. It looks so clean, so convincing, that it is genuinely hard not to believe it. But here is the trap. None of that softness was built for you. None of that apparent growth was set in motion because they finally understood what they did to you. Every small piece of personal work they appear to have done in those quiet months was assembled specifically to make re-entry into your life look irresistible. They are packaging themselves in the language of self-awareness because they know it is the one voice that is hardest for you to argue with. If they had come back angry, you would have kept your guard up. If they had come back blaming you, you would have felt nothing but certainty that nothing had changed. But when they come back as the gentler version of themselves, the version that finally appears to take responsibility, your nervous system relaxes in ways you are not even consciously aware of. That is the calculated phase almost no one warns you about. It is the final Hoover. It is the most dangerous one because it does not feel like a Hoover at all. It feels like the answer to a long-held prayer. It feels like proof that the relationship was never really what you feared it was. It feels like a clean second chance. And because it is wrapped in humility and softness, it is also the one most survivors cannot identify in time. By the time you finally recognize the pattern, you have usually already let them back in. You have already explained the things you once swore you would never explain again. You have already softened on the boundaries you promised yourself you would never bend. And the entire cycle quietly resets, the supply returns, the old dynamic locks back into place. The version of you that finally felt free slowly disappears again under the weight of someone else's endless need to be seen. This is the part almost nobody makes it far enough in silence to actually witness. And it is the part that makes all of the patient's stubborn quiet worth it. Because the only way to see the calculated phase clearly is to have already refused every single phase that came before it. Hold the line through the testing. Hold it through the hoovering. Hold it through the injury, the rage, the smear campaign, the long, quiet stretch. And most of all, hold it through the soft return. That is how the pattern finally loses its power over you for good. And once the pattern loses its power over you, something quietly shifts inside your own life that nobody else around you can quite name. You stop flinching at random phone notifications. You stop scanning every message for hidden meaning. You start sleeping through the night without that strange, tight knot in your chest. You catch yourself laughing at something small and realize it has been months since laughter came that easily. None of this happens overnight. None of it is dramatic. It is the slow, unglamorous healing that only shows up after the storm finally moves past your street. Do not leave yet, because the part I really want you to sit with is what happens to the other person when this cycle finally does not reverse itself. When no amount of softened return, no perfect third-party apology, no carefully worded late-night message pulls you back through the door. When, for the first time in what might be the entire history of that relationship, the supply line truly, stubbornly, permanently stays cut. Stay with me, because this is the part the survivor almost never gets to witness. And it is also the part that gives the entire story its strange and unexpected ending. When that finally happens, the other person does not destroy themselves. They do not have some cinematic breakdown. They do not wake up one morning changed and full of remorse and immediately call you to confess everything. That is the ending survivors secretly hope for, and it is also the one almost nobody in this situation ever receives. What actually happens is far less dramatic and far more unsettling. They simply move on to the next source. They find a new partner, a new audience, a new friend group, or a new online community to absorb the endless need that your silence used to absorb. From the outside, it looks like healing. From the outside, it looks like they finally moved past it. Mutual friends will even reach out to tell you that they seem genuinely happy now, almost as if nothing ever happened. That detail will cut deeper than almost anything else in the entire process, because it will feel like proof that you were never as important to them as they were to you. But hold on to this, because the truth is the opposite of what it appears to be. They did not heal, they merely relocated the supply. And the reason that new person, that new group, that new audience feels so effortless for them is not because you were never special. It is because managing a fresh supply line is always simpler than managing the one person who already saw through every mask. This is a hard thing to admit, but it is one of the most important pieces of the entire picture. You were not replaceable because you were weak. You were arguably the most dangerous supply source they ever had, precisely because you understood what you were looking at. You saw the pattern, you stopped rewarding it. And that combination, sharp awareness plus total withdrawal, is the single thing their entire psychological structure cannot withstand for very long. Every new partner they find will not understand what you understood. Every new friend will not see the cracks the way you eventually saw them. Every new audience will react in the exact ways they need supply to react. And that is why within a surprisingly short window, something subtle but unmistakable begins to happen. The new partner starts asking questions the new partner was never supposed to ask. The new friends start noticing small inconsistencies. The new audience starts turning quieter, less reactive, less impressed. And the cycle you once watched unfold in your own life quietly begins to unfold in someone else's. The only difference is that you are now standing outside the storm, watching it repeat itself from a safe distance, and finally understanding that the thing you thought was about you was never really about you at all. It was always about a system that was already running long before you arrived and will keep running long after you leave until the day something inside it finally cannot sustain itself anymore.